Before passing the baton onto our moderator, I would like to acknowledge the support of the many leaders in green building practice and policy with whom we work and who kindly shared this event amongst their networks. Passing on to the panel discussion now, it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Kim Si Lim, IFC Regional Director for Southeast Asia and Pacific. Kim, over to you.
Thank you, Corinne. On behalf of our audience around the world, I would like to thank His Excellency, President Iván Duque, and IFC's Managing Director, Makhtar Diop, for opening our session today with their reflections on climate leadership and what it takes to transform markets. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all who have dialed in today. I am Kim Si Lim, IFC's Regional Director for East Asia and the Pacific. Welcome and thank you to all our speakers and our audience members for joining us from around the world today for this panel discussion. As you have heard in these powerful opening remarks, green buildings are essential to achieving our net zero carbon ambitions, and the business case is very strong. This is why IFC plays a central role in green buildings. In our own investment program, we have cumulatively committed $7.5 billion to green buildings today. We have also invested directly in green buildings via more than 30 financial intermediaries. In fact, 1 in 4 of our transactions with financial intermediaries last year featured green buildings. IFC's research suggests that green building investment opportunity in developing countries is greater than 25 trillion. Hence, a very significant opportunity set is there for us. So today, I would like to ignite a vibrant dialogue with the following provocation. How can green finance, based on clear definitions and verifiable metrics? For the next 50 minutes, we will hear from a panel of distinguished world investment and pioneers in green building finance. Through their unique perspectives and leadership, we hope to inspire our audience with tangible examples of achievement and transformation. Because no one will win the race to zero carbon unless everyone gets across the finish line. Mr. Mora, let me first turn to you. So ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Juan Mora is president of Bancolombia. Bancolombia is a financial group with more than 20 million clients in Colombia, Panama, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Mr. Mora has coordinated and led the bank to its listing in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index since 2011, earning the recognition as one of the most sustainable banks in the world. Thank you, Mr. Mora, for joining us today. Let me begin with asking you about your experience. So Bancolombia was central in taking green buildings in Colombia from 0% to 20% of the market. Please share with us, what was the process of becoming the first green bond issuer in this sector? And how did the market react? Over to you, Mr. Mora.
Thank you very much. I want to say good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody, and thanking the IFC for this invitation. Regarding the question, sustainability is progressively becoming a priority for the world, and as investors and financial markets are increasingly demanding a compelling plan or route in order to address green and sustainable strategy. We in Bancolombia started this journey almost 12 years ago, and it's a journey. And it's important to have a purpose and to have clear what is this journey going to be. Where we took a performance-based approach to satisfy investors and pivot the construction market towards a more sustainable future by launching this sustainable funding strategy. It was a big challenge since until then, no private bank in Colombia had issued a sustainability bond. But we were aware of our responsibility to reaffirm our main purpose of promoting well-being for all. We started by identifying the need to implement and introduce a new type of asset in capital markets. And at the same time, we attempted to obtain social and environmental returns, as well as financial ones, while contributing to the consolidation of responsible and impact investments in the region. With the support of the IFC, we launched the first issuance, but we recognize that we need to create awareness among the communities. Thus, we consolidated a strategy that included events in 17 cities around the country, with 300 property developers participating, often meeting with clients one-on-one. Also, an intensive digital marketing strategy supplemented the bank's approach with an online knowledge platform, webinars, prime time advertising, and social media. And we consider that this was a success, not only for us, but for our region, because the positive reaction and perception we have achieved by sparkling demand among clients to different properties while saving money through the incentive, and this way having a network positive impact in the planet. The other thing that we consider was very positive is that others start to follow, and that's key. This is not a competition. We need to add the more participants as possible in order to really make a difference. So we are in this journey and we want to achieve more, but we need to continue working together with the government. You heard President Duque. The Colombian government has been key in this development. Also, the IFC and other multilaterals are key, and this is definitely a teamwork to really make a difference.
It's very interesting and inspiring journey that Mr. Mora. I picked up on a couple of sound bites, and you mentioned digital innovation, taking bold steps, and most of all leadership and capitalizing on others into the market. So what advice would you give to banks today who are interested in greening their buildings portfolio in construction or mortgage finance?
It is very important that blended finance it's included in this strategy, and how working together with different sources of finance really create the difference. So it's key that private money and also money for other institutions or social ONGs participate. And for banks, I think it's very clear that we need to be leaders and we don't need to wait for government to create the right conditions. It's a path that we start as a banks to work in order to create the right conditions. So in this sense, banks can serve as drivers to achieve sustainability and a greener future. When talking about diversifying and greening a building a portfolio, given our experience, I will state that what helped us to introduce these changes have a positive acceptance in the market is first having a clear reaction capacity and agile structure in order to respond, setting this on the agenda and having conversations with internal teams. Second, finding institutions that serve us as an example or allies that fosters and makes possible to enhance a long-term strategy. We welcome our banking colleagues, not only in Colombia, but in the world, to implement the strategy as a model for how to move towards a future with better performing buildings throughout green bonds. It's a journey, as I said, but banks should lead this journey and start moving in that direction because it's the right way, the right thing to do, but also it makes sense as an investment, which is very important to really make a difference.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Hearing loud and clear, the banks should take the lead in setting the ecosystem for building, green construction portfolios. Let me come back to you in the panel session. I would like to now turn to Mr. Brown. Mr. Dana Brown, who is Vice President Multifamily at Fannie Mae, manages the multifamily housing portfolio for the U.S. Federal National Mortgage Association, better known as Fannie Mae. He provides strategic direction for Fannie Mae's multifamily green and healthy housing business, which is responsible for over $87 billion in green mortgage-backed securities issued as of the end of 2020. He also leads the overall management and optimization of the low-income housing tax credit equity investment platform, including the equity syndicated transactional fund structuring, portfolio management, acquisitions, and credit enhancement activities. Welcome, Mr. Brown. And Mr. Brown, first question for you. Fannie Mae is the biggest issuer of green bonds for green buildings at $87 billion since the program's inception. What's the driving factors behind these issuances?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here. And we're very proud of that impact and that number, and being part of, as was previously mentioned, our collective efforts in this space. So first, for those on the call that may not know what Fannie Mae does, let me give it a little bit of a background. So Fannie Mae is a U.S. government-sponsored entity, not a government agency that was chartered by Congress and established back in 1938. Our overall mission is to support liquidity to the market and affordability in the secondary housing market. So Fannie is a secondary market lender. We don't originate loans, but we define the box of loans that we'll purchase on the secondary market and then securitize. So Fannie Mae makes the connections between the lenders that originate the loans and the investors that ultimately purchase the bonds backed by those loans. So the funds flow from the investors through Fannie Mae to the lenders and ultimately to the borrowers. Now, because Fannie Mae finances approximately 20% of the multifamily housing market and 30% of the single family housing market, that size gives us the ability to move markets in very impactful ways, such as green financing, in how we define the box of what we will buy. So again, we are very happy with the size of the business and how it's grown, but the green business didn't get this big overnight. And a journey is a good way to characterize it. So we started the green financing program in 2010, and we did our first loan 2 years later in 2012. So it grew over time. This is mortgage financing, not project financing. And our model is really based on a triple bottom line, environmental, the reduction of energy and water use; social, it increases the affordability of tenants. So in the U.S., tenants typically pay for some or all of their utilities; and financial, to the owners. Utility savings improve operations at the property, and ultimately we think they support property value. So the way we structured the program is such that almost any building can get the benefits of green financing, whether it's a building that's already green or making efficiency improvements at an existing property to turn a property green. And that's a large part of our success. As I mentioned earlier, it took 2 years after we began the program to close our first loan. So it took a while to reach a critical mass of interest. The team at Fannie Mae was constantly marketing and supporting this program in the beginning, teaching lenders and borrowers a new green language so that their financial teams understood the benefits of green. What we have found is that the interest rate benefit, the lower cost of a green loan from Fannie Mae, is critical. Multifamily borrowers are driven more by economics than by the environmental or social impacts. And we're fine with that. We're looking at outcomes. They're still doing the energy and water efficiency work, they're generating positive social impact. The size and scope, and when I mentioned sort of being able to move markets and hopefully set and improve standards, has helped even to make the green building certification space a little bit greener. There have been at least 3 green building certifications that have raised their own standards so that they could be part of our program. The success and a key driver has been the support of the whole organization at Fannie Mae, from the top down. Even before our focus on ESG, the leadership saw the benefits, long-term benefits of green financing. As I discussed, we started out slow. They had the vision that brought us to where we are now. Green financing also supports the affordability part of our mission. Utility cost savings for renter households in a green property are about $184 per year, where these efficiency improvements have been made. This is particularly significant for lower income households, which are more cost burdened in terms of utility costs than higher income households. And lastly, our green loans are projected to save 9.5 billion kBTUs of energy, save 8.5 billion gallons of water, and prevent 634,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. And that number will grow over time as we add more loans. So we do this business because we think it's good business, it's good long-term business, and it supports our mission in multiple ways.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Really amazing results and numbers you have there, but also similar to the Bancolombia experience. You said it's one that evolves over time, and it's a journey, and to a certain extent, you need to have that patience and that long-term view, right? To what extent have greeniums, you mentioned economics, right? So to what extent have greeniums incentivized Fannie Mae to step up work in this area?
To date, greeniums have really not been a big driver of our green financing business, and time will tell whether that changes. But so far, it hasn't been that big of a driver for really 2 reasons. The first was, going back to 2010, 2012, when we did the first loan, Fannie was kind of in front of the green market the green bond market when we started issuing them. There really wasn't enough demand to support a greenium, but we leaned in on this business anyway, as I mentioned, because we felt, and it's proved to be true, it's overall accretive for both our business and our mission. The second reason is we haven't seen and don't have enough evidence that we're getting a greenium on the green bond trades. While we know that our green bonds are bringing in new investors, we haven't yet been able to prove that our green bonds are getting a greenium. There's some anecdotal evidence that there was a green premium on a few specific trades, but anecdotal evidence isn't data. However, we are hoping that, as I mentioned, as demand grows, the bond market will continue to support our green lending efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So we've heard from two financiers of green buildings. Let us now turn to an investor in the space. So Ms. Bae Siew Kim is the CEO of Ascott Residential Trust, the largest hospitality trust in the Asia-Pacific region. She spearheads the overall strategic planning and implementation of investment and operational strategies. In addition, she oversees the strategic management of environmental, social, governance, and issues in key processes and decision-making, so as to deliver sustainable stakeholder value over the long term while growing responsibly. Ms. Bae, welcome. Could you please tell us more about your sustainability journey and what has Ascott been able to achieve so far, and what are the targets that your company is working towards?
Hi, thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. I'm dialing in from Singapore, and it's 9 p.m. here, so very best to be able to join you guys. So I'm from Ascott Residence Trust. As explained, we are the largest hospitality trust in Asia-Pac. ART, we are listed in Singapore Stock Exchange. We have close to about 8 billion of assets under our management. So we are close to about 89 properties in 15 different countries. So we do have a global portfolio, although we are listed in Singapore. And in our portfolio, we have service apartments, we have hotels, we have multifamily and student accommodation. So largely the lodging space in the real estate sector. And Ascott Residence Trust is also part of the CapitaLand Group, and CapitaLand is the largest developer in Asia. So the question on our sustainability journey, I would say that it has been an exciting journey, and we all know that real estate sector has the highest carbon footprints of any sector, right? And it contributes about 30% of global annual greenhouse emission and consumes 40% of the world energy. So it's definitely something that we have to look into as an investor. CapitaLand in 2020 set a sustainability master plan focusing around what we call 3 key pillars of build, enable, and accelerate. Building a portfolio that's resilient and resource efficient, enabling our future adaptive communities, and looking at sustainability, innovation, and collaboration. So as a group under the CapitaLand, we have set very bold targets to reduce our carbon emission, energy and water consumptions, waste generation, and also looking at use of renewable energy by 2013. For Ascott Residence Trust in our portfolio and part of the CapitaLand Group, we are very much guided by this sustainability building master plan and guidelines that are part of our asset management. So we consider all stages of a project. By the time we acquire new property, we operate the property, or we develop a property, there is a guideline, building guidelines that govern our entire analysis process. So for example, for new acquisitions, which we do very often, of course, we have to fill up an environmental health safety impact assessment. Basically is to just do a feasibility study of the development project, look at significant findings of the assessment and the cost implications of this environmental health safety, looking at the carbon emissions arising from the building, and then including some certain form of carbon tax in our investment analysis. For development projects that we have, we look at making sure that we meet certain form of green certification standard. So for example, in our portfolio, we do have a development project called Life One North, which we secure our building and construction green mark gold even before the property was completed. So we are definitely very focused in ensuring that we certify our property, make it green and efficient. Just in last year, 2020, in our journey, we obtained close to about 14 properties being green certified, and of course a number of which were IFC-H certified within our portfolio. We kind of increased our green certified buildings by close to about 4 times. So definitely a journey that we must take. We look at technologies to help us in achieving the target that we have set. So in many fronts, Ascott Residence Trust has been recognized for sustainability and corporate governance leadership. In 2021, in our GREPS assessment, Ascott Residence Trust were named the global sector leader in a hotel category. So we are the top rank in the Asia Pac hotel listed category. So definitely a journey that like everyone else that we go through, and still a long way to go, I believe. But we feel that it's important that we start somewhere, set our targets and work towards it. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Bay. Again, a journey, right? I think the message is quite clear through this discussion. And what I also heard is embedding sustainability targets in the corporate DNA has also helped Ascott. Ms. Bay, to what extent has sustainable financing or the availability of sustainable financing helped Ascott pursue and achieve its ambitions?
Yeah, very much, very much. CapitaLand as a group, they have actually set the target to secure 6 billion of sustainable finance by 2013. And of course, through this sustainable finance, we believe that the proceeds and interest savings from this sustainable finance will be able to help us drive some of these sustainability initiatives and innovations in the group. I like to share this slide on one of our property, Life One North. Is a co-living property that is just completed. It's the first co-living property in Singapore, and it's certified, by the Building and Construction Authority in Singapore as Green Mark Gold Plus. And we have secured a green loan on this property, and it's the first hospitality trust in Singapore to secure a green loan. This is a 300 over units co-living property that's fitted with green, energy efficient and smart building features. So definitely the sustainable finance will help us achieve some of these green targets that we have set. If you look at the next slide, this project we secured 3 years back, started the development, and at the onset, we have incorporated all sorts of sustainable elements on the external facade of the building to the internal of the building. There were openable windows for natural ventilation, sun shading fins to reduce the solar heat gain. We also have bicycle and electric charging lots to reduce our carbon footprint. Lots of sensor energy monitoring system to achieve energy savings of more than 30%. So definitely sustainable financing is important for corporates like us and investors to achieve some of the targets that we have set to make our buildings as green as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. May. I love the interior colors and very, very colorful designs as well. The last question for you, I'm curious to know, are your stakeholders expecting even more from your company, given all of this that you have done?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that, the reasons why many of us are now, into a lot of these sustainability efforts is because of the pressure that's been set by stakeholders. I would say that, when we started off the journey, you would think that, the stakeholder expecting us to do something. But as you start the journey, you realize that, hey, it's something that we want to do. It is important, right? And for the different stakeholders, for example, in our case, I would say that we have 4 different groups of stakeholders that we look at: the customers, which are our guests, our investors as well, our business partners, and also the regulators. And they all have different expectations from us, you know. And guests these days are not just looking at a very basic eco-friendly initiatives. And in the past, we have reduce, reuse, recycle. You know, we have gone past that, right? So now lots of guests are looking at how, you know, when they stay at our properties, they can offset their carbon footprint. And even corporate guests are now setting very high standards when they do their RFP process. They look at companies asking very in-depth questions on how we manage our properties to make sure that it's sustainable. So our customers have set very high standards to ensure that we are managing our properties on a very sustainable basis. And for investors, ESG definitely has become a very important part of their investment screening. So we have to keep up the standard to make sure that we continue to remain relevant on the investment front. And of course, for regulators in Singapore, we are governed by the Stock Exchange and also the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And they have both stepped up in terms of their regulatory efforts in sustainability of listed companies. And from next year onwards, as asset managers, we must assess the risks and financial implications of climate change and make relevant disclosures in our portfolio. So yes, stakeholders are very important in this journey process, but we do engage them, try to understand, you know, from them what is material ESG factors that we should be considering in our portfolio. So I would say that it's a two-way communication between the stakeholders and us in ensuring that we are, you know, in the right direction and a journey that we will see continuous improvement year on year. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like now to turn to the next investor we have on the panel, Mr. Rob Simpson, who is the Director of Sustainability at Ivanhoe Cambridge, one of the largest real estate investors globally. Mr. Simpson is responsible for global programs that are focused on carbon reduction, environment, social and governance, and climate change. He also supports internal teams with the development of sustainable finance and sustainable finance approaches and programs. Mr. Simpson, welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Simpson, what drives your focus on green buildings? You have declared some very aggressive energy efficiency targets. Please share with us how your company will achieve carbon neutrality by 2040.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all. And thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this panel. There's been some great comments that I will hopefully be able to add to up until this point. So at Ivanhoe, we have been working towards this for a number of years. I've been with the company for about 7 years, but the sustainability process has been around longer than that. We've really decided in the last couple of years to take a leadership position in the real estate investment industry to advance meaningful and impactful ESG impacts. And essentially what that has started with is evaluating comprehensively what our carbon footprint is. And as it was mentioned earlier, the real estate industry at large is responsible for somewhere between, I think the number is a little bit debatable, but somewhere between 30 and 40% of global carbon emissions. And as a result, we've got a huge role to play in fixing the problem that in some respects we've helped create. So we think of it as an opportunity to be a differentiator in the industry, to satisfy all the demands that are upon us from all of the stakeholders we've got, and some of those concepts were mentioned earlier as well. But it's really critical for us to lead on this file and to put in place some ambitious targets that will have real and meaningful impact. So we have set a net zero emissions goal operationally for our global portfolio by 2040. That announcement was made earlier this year in April of this year. Along with that, there's an interim target of a 35% reduction by 2025 of our 2017 baseline, as well as some commitments related to increasing our low carbon investments, which we equate to green building certifications of a gold standard or higher. So the process to come up with all of that was obviously fairly comprehensive. There's a huge amount of data that we evaluated. There's a lot of science that goes into coming up with these numbers. They were not just sort of picked out of the air and decided upon. It was a very robust process we went through. to determine what our targets should be. And part of that is engaging at every level of the organization and ensuring that from the CEO office down, everybody is aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it, what the benefit is, not just on an environmental perspective, but also on a financial perspective, on a corporate responsibility perspective, and all of those pieces. And I think one of the challenges historically we've had as an industry is we sometimes frame sustainability or CSR or ESG around, one or two solutions. And I think what we've learned through this process is that you really have to have engagement at all levels. Everybody has a role to play. And it's really important to share that information and get everybody on board. And then within that, there's also a ton of things that actually have to happen at the portfolios and asset levels. And whether that's, continuing with programs related to energy efficiency, whether it's related to investments in renewable energy to supplement the power that you are using. There's the green finance piece, which I'll touch on in a second. There's a bunch of different drivers, and the drivers vary by building and asset type, and they also vary by region. So you need to pick the drivers in those particular markets that are going to help you move in that direction. And then pulling all of this together is there needs to be investment made in all of these areas. So how do you do that in a sustainable way? And that's where we have tied in the sustainable finance piece over the last 18 months or so, particularly making it a priority. And whether that's through green bonds, which we have issued, through green construction loans, which we have taken part in, and more recently an announcement we made of converting about $8.5 billion of corporate debt facilities into sustainability-linked loans, where the margin that we benefit from can be improved by achieving impactful sustainability KPIs, whether it's our GRESB score. And GRESB, for those on the phone, is the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, which is a global survey that a lot of real estate organizations participate in. So by achieving an increased score on that every year, by reducing our carbon footprint every year, and one other metric that we use, we're able to benefit from essentially the cost of capital on those loans. And we've done that through about 10 lenders, primarily through North America and Europe. But we've created a model that we're hoping to advance elsewhere using the same sort of KPI. So I've just said a lot. There's a lot of pieces to all of this, but putting together a comprehensive plan that ties or attempts to tie all of these things together, I think has been a really interesting and great process for us to follow. I would also add that, there are unknowns. We don't have every answer to get us to 2040 yet, but we're putting the pieces in place that are getting us on the right path towards that. And that's really what the last sort of 18 months has been spent doing.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. I guess clearly you're building your journey towards achieving carbon neutrality in 2040, and that involves a lot of planning and detail-oriented work. Clear KPIs was what I picked up, and also like Ascott embedding sustainability in the corporate DNA to make sure that it is a KPI that permeates the organization. I'd like to spend the remainder of the time that we have today, which is about 15 minutes, getting the panel's reactions on a few key topics for the green building space. And Mr. Simpson, since I have you on the screen, I'd like to start with you. So how important is third-party certification for green building finance issuance and reporting?
Sure, it's very important. And we have a really significant program related to green building certifications and the requirements to achieve certain levels, again, depending on the market where our assets are located. But on the sustainable finance piece, part of the benefits that we're seeing there, particularly on the construction loan side, is achieving a gold standard on a green building certification. So we use it as a proxy for a number of things because, certifications typically cover a number of different areas within the ESG lens. So it allows you to satisfy some of those requirements through a certification as opposed to having to mandate all of those individual requirements separately. So there's a benefit there. We can also, relay that information to prospective tenants so that they understand what type of building they're going to be leasing from us and occupying on a day-to-day basis. And it also allows us to push them to follow that same sort of program. So if we're turning over a building that's performing to a certain standard, we want them to continue that, and the education and messaging and lease language and payment terms and all of these things can be connected so that essentially they're continuing to operate the building as well as we want them to and have set them up to do so. So the layers of benefits related to green building certifications are significant, and we try to leverage those everywhere we possibly can.
Excellent. Ms. Bay, could we get your inputs on how third-party certification and means for Ascott? Thanks.
I would say my comment very similar to what Rob has just shared. Definitely very important, as we have actually set a target to green 100% of our properties by 2020. And by setting a target, then you will know that, actually it's definitely very important for us to get this green certification done. It's almost like a stamp of approval that recognizes the green fundamental of a property. And therefore, that's what really green certification does for us. And through that, we are able to also achieve certain sustainable finance for us to help us in our process and against towards a certification. So definitely a very important element of sustainability to get the green certification. We are very blessed. I mean, for us, we are in the service apartment lodging segment, and IFC has been a very key partner with Ascott for greening our properties. In fact, in 2018, Ascott actually signed an MOU with IFC to pioneer a green certification for the service residence industry as part of the AGE program. And that has really helped us, certify a lot of our properties as well. So we're very, very thankful for IFC being very supportive of our industry and drive towards our green efficient buildings. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Bay. So we've heard from the investors in green buildings. So let's go to the financiers. So Mr. Brown, maybe we'll start with you. How important is certification when you're thinking about green financing?
In a similar vein, yes, for Fannie Mae, third-party green building certifications are a critical component of our business. It provides options to borrowers who have made the commitment to greening their properties or want to offset the incremental cost of a certification through a perm mortgage finance loan. So as we look to accelerate a transition to a low carbon economy, green building certifications are a critical step to providing that roadmap to reducing greenhouse gases for both new and existing buildings. As I mentioned in the earlier remarks, it is, we use certifications. We currently accept 40 different certifications from 13 different organizations and do assessments on these on an ongoing basis. It's important to both our program and to investors because we know that there's a strong quality control for the environmental criteria, including energy efficiency and other elements as well. On the subject of green building certifications, later this year, we're going to be rolling out our new list of green building certifications. And I'm very pleased to announce that EDGE, the IFC's program, will be the newest certification that we accept.
Thank you. That's great to hear. Mr. Mora, would you like to share your thoughts on third-party certification?
Sure. Certification is key, and it's a component that we all need to have as a part of our process. there are different ways of approaching the certification of projects. And I think we should be aware, particularly in developing countries, that we need to evolve to introduce new practices in a manner that makes sense from the economics standpoint. But it is key, because if we don't have a clear standard, it is very difficult to be sure that we are doing the right job, and could end financing projects that are not really green or environmental friendly. So it is really important to standardize, and we have the government, which is a key participant, to create the right legal framework. But on top of that, we need the participation of private entities that really help to introduce best practices regarding construction. Other thing that I want to highlight, it is important also to work on retrofit existing buildings to be energy efficient. And that's a key component that we need to have in mind. It's not just new buildings. How are we going to certify existing buildings to become environmental friendly? And also standards and certifications there are key in order to really have a positive impact on the environment.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. I totally agree about the idea of expanding it into retrofit. I think I have time for one more question. So, Mr. Mora, you mentioned that it's helpful for the government to be able to provide the legal framework for green buildings and green finance. Could you share with us which public policies have been most effective in your experience in promoting green building finance? And if you had the voice, or if you had the opportunity to speak to the public policymakers, what would you like them to do?
Governments are a key component on this process, as well as investors and financial institutions. But governments, they have two key roles. They are the ones that create the right framework on terms of what are the requirements and what are the standards, the legal standards. But they also have a key part or a key role to play, which is how to create the right incentives in terms of economics. And taxes usually are powerful tools to incentivize not just the developers, but also the buyers of the project. So governments are key, and I insist that we create incentives in both parts, not just for the developers, which they need, because usually investments in sustainable construction, it's more expensive than traditional construction. So they need to create, the governments need to create the right incentives until economics level, and they have projects that are competitive in terms of price to other projects. But also it is important to create incentives for buyers, and in Colombia we have both, which are they have been tools that have helped us to develop or to go in this journey and continue evolving.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Mr. Simpson, would you like to come in?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's been super important for us to understand regionally what government and policymakers are doing, and there's indications in certain markets that it has a real effect. If you look at parts of Europe that have requirements around buildings needing to perform at a certain level, you need to actually publish your score of energy performance on certain buildings before they can be sold. In New York, we see through an ordinance called Local Law 97, where building owners are required to bring their emissions down to a certain level by a certain date, or they will be faced with significant financial penalties, and they are significant. So where we have policymakers putting legislative things like that in place, or regulatory frameworks in place like that, it helps us build the case to do the specific things we need to do in those markets. And if we can do it through a sustainable finance lens, as I mentioned earlier, even better. So it's a critically important piece of how all this needs to fit together.
Thank you. Ms. A?
Yeah, okay. So in Singapore, the governments and regulators are definitely also very vital in setting the ESG agenda. Singapore, our government has actually put forth the Green Plan 2030, and basically it's just getting the whole nations and everyone involved in transforming Singapore into a global city of sustainability and working towards a net zero emissions as much as we can. So the policy that has been set, and then setting a target on the type of properties, the green buildings, the green building master plan that they have set, where they have actually set 3 key targets, what they call 80-80-80 by 2030. And that target actually kind of drive what we investors need to do. So basically 80% of buildings need to be green by 2030. 80% of the new developments by GFA needs to be very efficient in terms of energy, and 80% improvement in energy efficiency. So when the government sets a standard or the master plan for us to achieve towards that, so the private sector will then work towards, achieving that overall arcing master plan that's been achieved. But while setting the standard, to support some of these initiatives or target that's been set, the Monetary Authority of Singapore has also put in place a Green Finance Action Plan that will actually set some guidelines for environmental risk management and providing sustainable loans and bond markets to support, these targets that the government has set for us to build, such sustainability capabilities. So overall, I think over in Singapore, the government has very, grand plan to achieve the green targets that they've set, but also put in place relevant mechanism for us to achieve that. Yeah.
So very important role that the government has. And last but not least, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much. And I know we're short on time, and I'm going to kind of echo what much has been said, because it's absolutely right. In terms of policy, I think it's first about benchmarking, measuring, and then it's requirements. What are the performance standards that are required? And we heard Mr. Simpson mention about New York, but as Mr. Mora mentioned, critical to that is the incentives that are put in place. And it's similar to the incentives that we have in our financing program. It can't be an unfunded mandate. It's what is the data and what are the measurements and what are the standards that should be set? What are the performance standards that must be met, and what are the incentives to incentivize that broadly? So I think I'm echoing much of what's been said, but it's not surprising that it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown. I'm afraid that we have come to the end of the session. I want to say a big thank you to my fellow panelists for their contributions and really congratulate them on the achievements they've made so far, and for sharing the journeys that they've been on thus far. I wish you all the best in continuing your journey. And I hope, to the audience, I hope today's discussion has inspired you as you take your next steps in your journey to a net zero carbon. For now, we'd like to share with you IFC's EDGE program and show you how it can empower your organization to map finance and then track your progress towards Paris alignment. EDGE certification has grown exponentially over the last year, despite some uncertain times. Now, EDGE certifies well over $1 billion in real estate every month worldwide. So with many thanks to our panelists for sharing their insights and their journey, I'm now passing the baton to the EDGE team for a short briefing. To our audience, please stay connected to see how EDGE is enabling whole portfolio certification, and retrofit planning to achieve net zero carbon across all building types and all climates. Thank you.
Kim Si Lim, thank you so very much for staying up super late there in Asia and leading us through what I found a truly inspiring panel. And wow, what a vote of confidence in EDGE from Fannie Mae. We've been talking to Fannie Mae, but we were not prepared for that announcement. So that has really blown the team away. An inspiring session all round though. And thanks to our panelists and also to our donors who have supported IFC's work for many years now, for well over 10 years now, and made this event possible. So next up, we have a short introduction to EDGE as a financial tool to drive green building investment pipeline and to simplify green finance impact reporting. We'll also look into detail into a case study of a whole portfolio zero carbon certification from a client in the Philippines, NEO, a property company. But before we start the EDGE session, let me draw your attention now to our audience survey, which we'll find in the chat function of this Zoom call. We had too large an audience to take questions during the panel, but we do want to hear your perspectives. And so we hope that you will take 5 minutes to share your thoughts with us. So this session is going to dig into some details for viewers who are curious to learn more about EDGE and why the building and finance sectors are adopting it at an accelerating rate. And I will be joined by my colleague, Michelle Farrow, and also by the inventor of EDGE, Prashant Kapoor. And hi.
Hello.
Great. So as you can see from this graph, EDGE has grown exponentially over the last 2 years, despite the severe disruptions to the building sector in general. And we now stand at about 30 million square meters of floor space EDGE certified, of which 6 million is certified EDGE advanced or net zero carbon ready, and 1/3 of a million has been certified net zero carbon. EDGE now certifies well over $1 billion worth of floor space every month and has a registration backlog of about $60 billion worth of floor space. So what has driven this growth? Well, firstly, EDGE is growing because it was designed by IFC for financial institutions. So from the very outset, we made sure we aligned with all the major green finance standards: ICMA, GRESB, the Climate Bonds Initiative, CDP, and now the EU taxonomy too. EDGE takes a quantified approach to certify energy, and that is precisely the approach that the EU taxonomy is taking by assessing efficiency by kilowatt hours consumed per square meter per year. So for assets outside EU member states, we're already seeing banks look to EDGE as a standard for EU taxonomy reporting. And here is just a handful of the financial institutions now using EDGE. The second reason for the rapid growth that we're seeing in EDGE adoption is that it is a universal standard, but adapted to local climates, local building codes, and local customers all over the world. And it also covers almost all building types. EDGE is certified just about everything, from high-end offices to social housing, and the majority of our work is in the residential sector, in fact, with a good part of that in social housing. Social housing is not an outlier for us. We're also working particularly in recent time with the fast-growing warehouse and data center portfolios. We're working in light industry, universities, even COVID hospitals designed and built at lightning speed have been certifying with EDGE over the last few months. But the third and the main reason for Edge's success has been its affordability and its ease of use for building developers and their financiers. You see, the Edge system has three components: a free design software that speeds up costing and decision-making, an achievable set of standards which just focus on energy, water consumption, and embodied energy in materials, and a robust certification which streamlines green asset identification and impact reporting for green finance. Edge has three certification levels to support different levels of ambition. An Edge building has to exceed business as usual performance by 20% in energy, water, and embedded energy and materials relative to the local business as usual approach for new construction. An Edge advanced building has higher energy efficiency, at least 40%. And an Edge zero carbon building is an Edge advanced building which demonstrates sole use of renewable energy in operation or the purchase of carbon offsets. The free Edge software helps designers even before they have a design. So green measures are incorporated from the start, minimizing incremental costs. As a design is developed and green measures are selected, the software instantaneously provides a calculation of the cost and the benefit of different options. So cost-effective trade-offs can be decided upon quickly. We will see the Edge software demonstrated in a moment, but you can see here that for each design iteration, the results panel immediately shows how each choice influences progress towards achieving the Edge standard with the energy, water, and materials percentages. And then on the next row, you see here, you have the annual utility cost reduction, the incremental cost, and then the payback in years, which helps with the commercial decision-making. Once the design is finished, the whole certification process is integrated into the same software and executed online. So the software not only speeds up green design, but also the certification paperwork. And here you can see the resulting Edge certificate, which delivers all that's needed for a bank to confirm green finance eligibility and provide investors with the all-important impact reporting in terms of greenhouse gas, energy, and water savings. Also, in residential projects, each unit receives a unique certificate to align it with green mortgage paperwork. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Prashant Kapoor, the inventor of Edge, who will illustrate just how easy it is to use the free design software. He's going to talk about a whole portfolio certification, the one I mentioned with NEO in the Philippines, and show how Edge can map and track a verifiable path to zero carbon. So Prashant, over to you, or I'm now seeing Michelle, or is it over to Michelle?
Can you see my screen, Corinne?
Yes, great, Prashant. We can see your
screen. You can see my screen and the Edge software. Can you see that? Just making sure. Yes. Okay. Great. Excellent. Lovely to be here, and what a great event actually for us to see all the various stories from Bancolombia and from the US and from Singapore. I just wanted to quickly demo the tool, and then I'll come back again to kind of describe how I see this could mean further expansion and going deeper in terms of tackling climate change. Just wanted to introduce you to our website. This is edgebuildings.com. You can have a look yourself, and there's sort of stuff about why IFC is doing it and all that, but also what it means to each of you. So please do read. If you're a bank or a developer or government agency, we kind of cater to different audience. That's been one of the reasons we believe the ecosystem matters a lot. And also do take a peek at the projects that are here. I find this, as a person that's been working on this for a while, really rewarding to see developing countries with real projects that each one can learn from each other. So you don't have to always look to the West or, kind of find projects that are, sort of of one type, if you like, right? So here you can see it could be a very modest low-income housing in Ghana all the way to sort of high-end housing in Colombia. So you have a nice range here. You have projects that might only have achieved to 20%, or a project that has gone zero carbon edge advanced. So it's sort of all sorts of projects here. If you click this button here, which I've already clicked and have it set up, you will find access to Edge app. It's free to use, as Corinne mentioned earlier. And if you register, you're able to save the projects and so on. But otherwise, you can pretty much play around with it all the anytime. From a investor financier's perspective, I don't want to kind of give the impression that you have to use the tool for every project of yours. I think what I wanted to communicate is that Edge is available for the whole supply chain, right? All the way from designer, from a developer, from a property owner to the property tenant. Each one can use it and get a different sense from it. And what I wanted to get across for those of you who are financial intermediaries, that it's really not that complicated. You don't have to really just leave it to the designers to do. You could yourself look at this, or your teams could look at this and set internal benchmarks as to what your specification, what are you looking for, and so on. So without further ado, the tool has been built for different types of buildings. So you can see offices, retail, hospitality. We can do a whole range from industrial buildings to kind of humble homes, and apartments. But let's try an office building for now in Colombia, as we've had two great speakers from Colombia. And let me choose sort of the warm and humid Cartagena, just to make a point. So once you load that city, essentially what we have done in the background is collected a lot of data. So you have access to, the temperature, humidity, monthly values, solar radiation, rainfall, cost of energy, cost of diesel, all of that has been uploaded, and the local practices as well. So you have the lifestyle elements plus the kind of contextual elements that have been incorporated into that dimension. So you don't have to go around looking for expensive kind of data, really. And essentially, you can feed in some project details in order to say, but let me jump to, let's say you're building a 15,000 square meter, office, which is about, let's say, 10 stories tall. You can start playing with it right away. So you don't have to kind of have a design and a CAD drawing and all of that. You can get a sense, even for a common layperson, you can get a sense of, okay, that's the sort of height of the building, that's the square meters. What can I do for my buildings, right? And if you have more details, if you're further along the design process, you can feed in other information like occupancy. You can even put in the breakdown of areas and stuff. So, but I'll leave that for now. You don't have to do that. You always have default values in Edge. Now, as Corinne mentioned, we look at energy, operation energy, and CO2, water consumption in a building, and materials in the form of embodied energy. So the energy that's gone into making the building materials itself, right? And let me go into energy first. What happens when you click this is that you get a benchmark, right? So we put the shape of the building, we put the location, so it has all the local details and some of the specification of the building, and it knows that typically this is what you would get, about 120 odd, kilowatt hours per meter square, right? And you also see about, a third or a little more than a third, actually, almost 40%, the fan energy and the cooling all goes into air conditioning. That's fairly obvious in a hot place like Cartagena. You can see the lighting load, a bit of equipment load and all of that. And then this is your building. This is your base case. And essentially what you can do is on the left-hand side, you'll have a whole list of ideas. And as you click these things, so let's say you're going to put shading on your windows, on the openings, you can see what difference it makes immediately. So this is not a regression. It actually is doing online, on the cloud, building physics calculation. and it's at your fingertips. So, you know, you can quickly see what the project is doing. Let me do a few more things. And as you do this, I wanted to show you the results at the top. You can see sort of fantastic, sort of quick reactions. You can see how much it is going to cost you to do the shading of the windows, how long is the payback, what is the savings in dollars, and so on. You can even look at CO2 and things like that here. Okay. But let's stay with the costing, as it seems like the main angle for most clients to begin with, right? And essentially, let's say you kind of have better glazing, right? Or let's say you have, you know, sort of this is better double glazed windows. Let's say you have better air conditioning systems. Let's say you have water cooled chillers. You know, and as you click these things, you can see 15%. So you can really be razor sharp in terms of where you want to put your money, rather than kind of do a blanket attack. Or actually, a lot of times what happens in sort of, you know, in design process is it gets valued out, right? Value engineered, they call it. So all this sort of stuff gets out, but actually you might be taking things out that have a much better return or payback, as you can see, almost less than 2 years here. And let me do a few more things. So lighting, you know, better lighting systems inside, even sort of daylight control. What I don't want to show you now, but you can have a look at this. Your designers can actually put the shape of the building as well and optimize the shape as well to make it work. But for now, it's just a generic octagonal building, but you can actually modulate that too. So as you do this, you can see 3-4 clicks and I've got 30% savings. Now, so you can see how, you know, useful this would be, right, for any design team member here to make sense of this. So that's kind of, let's try to get to what Corinne was talking about, edge advanced. You know, and let's say we go for, you know, the last 10% using solar panels, and you can adjust the size of it. It tells you how much capacity you would need, how much roof area you have, and you can see, bang, 50% saving there, right? And finally, as we were talking about net zero, the tool, once you hit 40%, it starts to open up the avenue to kind of look at, you know, offsetting this or finding off-site possibilities for the other 52%. So, you know, here you have a choice of using renewable energy wheeled and banked to you, or having renewable energy credits or carbon offset. So you can choose what is your, you know, mechanism to offset or kind of balance the books, if you like, to make it net zero. So let me just choose carbon offset. You can see very quickly, you know, you can neutralize the amount of carbon emissions here, and you can start to measure this. Now, I think we may have limited time for me to show you the water and materials. You know, Corinne, is that right?
Yes, we are a little bit. We've got another 10 minutes.
Okay, so let me just quickly flash these. You can see how simple it is to look at the water aspect as well. You know, you can see, again, just like with energy, you know where to focus. I mean, obviously in an office, water is not the biggest issue, right? But it would be in housing or a hotel. But here you can really just go to, you know, you can see it's the toilets, right? So you can actually then look at, you know, having dual flush systems. You can see the increase in cost potentially or not, for that matter, once it recalculates, and so on, right? So you can do that. And then on the materials, again, really practical. This is not looking at, you know, fancy, you know, woolly, green and hairy stuff, just looking at practical stuff as to where is your biggest embodied energy. Embodied carbon is another way one can approach this. So you can see most of the heavy part of the building, the slab of the building for a 15-story building is where most of that, in the steel and the cement is where it's stored, right? So imagine if your structural engineer could actually design your project to be, you know, not flat slabs and kind of waste concrete like that, but really have thinner, slender, maybe a few extra columns to make that work. But you can see, bang, you can see 15-17% savings. Or you could actually choose to just have a different material, you know, all the way, right? So you can actually, instead of using bricks, you can use, you know, something else, and you can quickly start to figure out where the difference is. Okay, I'll stop here and pass and request for the slide to come back.
Thanks very much. So if we can just bring up the slide deck again. Over to you, Prashant.
Yeah, could you have it on full screen, please? Great. So thank you. As you can see that, you know, the software can do a lot. But I want to just step back to the bigger picture here. Why are we doing all this, right? And as Ms. Bay said, buildings contribute 30% of the GHG emissions around the world, about 40% of all energy use. So it's significant, right? And that's the existing buildings today. And if you think about it, in emerging markets, that's likely to double, right? So there's a huge impact from buildings. Now, obviously, all of this stuff that we showed you is predominantly focused on new construction, the design aspect. But obviously, we need to think about existing buildings as well, because we'll never make it, right, in terms of getting on a zero carbon pathway. So to achieve Paris alignment by 2030, all new buildings should be net zero in operation. And by 2050, every building should be net zero carbon in operations and should offset any emissions that come from the demolition or construction. That seems to be the agreed pathway for buildings. Next slide, please. Now, you may ask, how can EDGE help financial intermediaries and building owners map and track this Paris-aligned pathway? How could it work for you and your clients, right? So this is a quick slide to sort of share some of our thoughts here. Firstly, you can do this by using the tool and put the whole inventory of current buildings and check the performance of your portfolio. Essentially, we've seen this as Ascott was mentioning earlier. We can put the whole portfolio and get a sense of, okay, where are the weak links? Where can we do refurbishment most cost effectively to bring them to a good standard, right? So that would be the first step, to reduce energy use in that sense. Now, don't forget that refurbished buildings that can go deep in terms of carbon emissions are also eligible for green financing, right? Secondly, by using EDGE to raise the quality or entry criteria for new acquisitions. Now, green bonds and green loans can cover the full cost of any new green building. Don't forget, we have done, as Corinne mentioned earlier, and also we invested in Bancolombia. It's the same path. So I think when it comes to new buildings, it's no brainer there, right? Third, actually, this is something that was mentioned earlier too, a portfolio approach, or an approach where at a corporate level, you can put you can come up with targets for your total carbon emissions or total energy use, and financial instruments such as sustainable linked bonds or loans, where year-on-year carbon reduction can be checked against a performance target. That could be a great way to incentivize the sector, as a bank or a financial intermediary, to get the property sector looking at a corporate level to push the market in the right direction. Obviously, you can have a step up or a step down to make that work finally. Next slide, please. Now, this is a great example, and there are many more that I think Michelle will talk about, but NEO has been a leading asset owner in the Philippines, and they've already embarked on a journey to zero carbon with an impressive portfolio of large 7 office buildings in Manila. Let me just quickly show you how they did it. They used the EDGE app, on the existing assets. These were existing buildings, meaning more than 3-4 years old. And NEO first modeled the performance in the buildings and then identified the most cost-effective retrofitting measures to raise the energy efficiency standard to up to EDGE Advanced. We were talking about 40% and above. Then, they worked with us to commit a 3-year retrofit timeline. And then we certified their existing designs, the retrofit designs, to meet the EDGE standard. That gave them the sort of confidence and flexibility that they were going down the right path. And then they submitted the fossil fuel energy bills for these projects, and then a proof of the carbon offsets they were looking at. Of course, the projects were awarded provisional certificates this October, but moving forward, the projects will be recertified every 2 years, and the retrofits, of course, have to be executed on time to maintain the EDGE Zero Carbon certification. Now, you can see that you don't have to wait 2 years till you finish a refurb. Just like in a new construction, you can approach existing stock, get it certified for your intention, right? Get the carbon offset so that you're not you can start to kind of work towards the goals. And as you retrofit and the energy and carbon declines, your offsets could also shrink, So that's kind of how essentially NEO has approached it. Next slide, please. And now what I'll do is I'll pass this one on to Michelle, who's been really championing this idea of getting more and more portfolio approach and getting leaders in the industry. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Prashant. NEO is one of the Edge Zero Carbon Pioneers, which is a program that we're running right now along with COP26, who have made quantified near-term pledges to build or retrofit floor space to net zero carbon ready standards. IFC estimates that pledges already exceed 10 billion worth of floor space in place by 2030 from the companies that you see listed on the screen here. We encourage more developers to join the Edge Zero Carbon Pioneers, and we encourage financial intermediaries to reach out to them as well. And you can find this on our website right on the front page. Thank you, and I'll pass it back to Corinne.
Well, thank you so much, Prashant and Michelle, for that. And ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. If you would like to learn more, please do visit our website or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. And if you found today's session helpful, please do give us feedback. Again, our survey is in the chat box. Just click on it and you're right through. And please, if you can give us 5 minutes of your time to share your thoughts, we would very much appreciate it. So wishing you a good continuation to your morning, to your afternoon, or just a good night's sleep if you're in Asia. Goodbye from the Edge team. Thank you so much for having joined us today.